So you see how one medicine, which everybody thinks, oh, it's a nice relaxing cup of chamomile tea, can do so much for you. And I think the skill and the real kind of art of a herbalist is to know your herbs so well that you can, almost like you could choose a herb to fit a specific profile if you know them well enough, in terms of what any individual patient might need. So I find in my own life, for example, and what you need is very much, a function of your own health and what you're experiencing in your health, whether you're prone to digestive problems, whether you're prone to nervous problems. For me, one of the most important categories of herbs is the adaptogens. And I use a lot of these in practice, and I use a lot with myself as well. And this word, adaptogen, was coined by a Russian scientist in the 1960s. A couple of Russian scientists called Bretman and Dardimov, and they had found that there are some plants that were being used in the Sami up north, in Lapland and the far north Siberia, which had the ability to promote longevity, but also stamina and resilience. And they started experimenting first with troops on detail, on campaign. I think at the end of the Second World War, actually, they found that by chewing some roots, one of the famous plants involved in this was Siberian Ginseng, they could actually, those soldiers could march for longer and without being fed. So you can see the kind of mentality that's operating there. But that discovery of what an adaptogen can do has proved immensely useful in the world of herbal medicine, because I think we're under a huge amount of stress at the moment. And the choice of plants that we have available to us to help to relieve stress is truly stunning. And Siberian ginseng is a herb that I regularly use, although in some senses, because it's an exotic, it doesn't grow naturally here. I think we also have to find plants that grow nearer to home that can do the same thing. So, for example, I would choose oat seed or burdock root for that purpose. Borage herb, maybe. Nettle even can be classed as an adaptogen as well. So if you know your plants in the sort of true expanded profile of the plants, you can start expanding your use of them and your knowledgeable use of them. In other words, knowing how to choose plants for any particular. One of the most important things that they can do for me is I'm a very busy person. I don't really rest that much. I do. I've learned over the course of the years that sleep is very important and that downtime is very important. But I maximize waking hours, and in order to do that, I have to have a phenomenal quantity of, amounts of stamina. And I find the plants are what I turn to generate that, and they're very, very effective.
Well, I mean, that sounds exactly like something I think a lot of people, including myself, would love to know about. What do you go for on that front then? What's the most useful sort of herbs for you?
Well, I do go with the exotics, as I call them, the ones that don't necessarily grow here, and I would cite the ginsengs, all of them, including the Siberian one. Astragalus is a herb I use a lot for that purpose. But I'm really stop, because our own herbs, like I've mentioned a few things like burdock and nettle. Dandelion and burdock is an old English combination, reportedly originally discovered by St. Thomas Aquinas. Actually, he was carousing a bit too hard in the monastery one day, and he went out the front door to have a leak, fell over a burdock plant and landed face first in a dandelion plant. And then he sort of got the idea that the presence of these two plants together wasn't accidental, and apocryphally, the story goes, he brewed them up and made the first ever dandelion and burdock. Now you can find that all over the place now. They usually fill it with sugar and present it as a soft drink, but originally it was what we call a tonic, and tonic is another word for an adaptogen, really. A tonic is something which just makes you feel better all round. So I think let's choose the herbs that we can most easily get hold of. Let's choose dandelion and burdock, for example, and then nettle, which I also mentioned, which is a fantastically multi-skilled plant.
What would you do with nettle, in which case? That's one that particularly stands out to me, because from my experience of life, it has always been something that I've steered clear from, ironically. So what's the real value with nettle specifically?
It's nutritive, for start. So a lot of the adaptogens have a nutritive quality to them. They actually impart very, very specific nutrients that we need. So nettle is full of nutrients, particularly minerals, calcium, magnesium, iron, you name it's probably there. But those are the three main ones. It is an alterative, which means that it helps to clean out impurities in the blood. And it does this mainly by stimulating the kidneys to filter out acid residues in the blood. So it alkalizes the system. That's the leaves. If we turn to the root, many of the same virtues as the leaves, but also a few extra ones. It's a good one for looking after the prostate in men. So if you've got any of the problems that gentlemen get when they approach a certain age, kind of with the urinary system, then nettle root is superb for that. And many of the adaptogens, by the way, do a good job with the sort of kidney reproductive area, which is the area we're in there too. And then there's the nettle seed. Now, nettle seed has been shown to regenerate kidney function in cases of chronic degenerative kidney disease. So this is something that the doctors don't admit can be done. They say once you've lost kidney function, that's it. You're either down for dialysis or a kidney transplant. But I've seen patients regain kidney function using nettle seed as a medicine, and that's an archetypical adaptogenic thing, because most of the traditional medicine adaptogens, the ones that we know from Chinese medicine, for example, are actually kidney tonics.
That fascinates me, what you've just said there. I suppose this leads us back into what we were saying of the fact that you're promoted in the direction of what is profitable, not in what is truthful a lot of the time.
Yeah.
That really interests me. I'd like to know, actually, for I'm going to be totally selfish here. I'd like to know what would be most useful for someone who struggles with sort of performance anxiety and just anxiety in general, stress, I suppose. What would you prescribe me?
Let's stick with the locals, and I'd say a wild oat is the best remedy for that. And you can use the oat seed, which is more of a sort of nutritive adaptive. And oat seed is basically porridge, so a lot of us are eating it already. But we have the sort of wild variety tends to have more of the steroidal compounds, which help with stress, and they help to shore up the adrenal glands, for example. But we can also use the flowering tops. They call them milky oats, which are absolutely fantastic and actually clinically, there have been lots of clinical trials, actually, standard RCTs, as we call them, the famous randomized double-blinded placebo-controlled trials done on oat tops for treating anxiety, and it's a super powerful medicine. It's as powerful as some of the pharmaceuticals. It scores very well in comparison.
Wow. Well, I have to say, when I was munching down on my porridge, I didn't know that it would be soothing me. It's the way that it must have been. I think it's something that I think would be good actually for us to sort of tie here nicely is